science. Your book talks about a new age of science that came about as a result of, well, men like Louis Pasteur and Charles Darwin. Science became more and more secularized as time went on. Now, well, you know this already. Pasteur first. I've already mentioned him. He is credited with proving that germs cause disease and that these germs could be killed by dishwashing, hand washing, fundamental sanitation. The name pasteurization of milk is named after him. A lot of your typhus, typhoid fever, was spread by milk. That was before his time. Well, he figured out a way to heat the milk without boiling it, but heat it and get rid of the typhus germs and most other germs also, and guarantee that you were drinking milk that was at least mostly germ-free. Now, granted, all germs are not killed till you get to the boiling point, but at 120 degrees, most of your germs are killed. 150, even more are killed. 180, only a very, very few germs can survive that. At 212, they're all killed. Well, you can't boil milk and still have it workable, but he would heat it up to 150 degrees. And this process was called pasteurization, named after him. In addition, right there on your wall, folk, you see a periodic table of elements. Some of you probably have seen it before. This class is originally designed to be a chemistry class. Credit the periodic table to a man named Mendeleev, a Russian. Oops, I don't know how to spell that. M-E-N-D-E-L-E-E-V. Figured out that the elements could be classified based on how many protons and neutrons they had. Classified them according to atomic weights. Now again, you'll learn this in a lot more detail in your chemistry classes. You can't take high school and college chemistry without running into the periodic table. And by the word element, I mean this is as far as it can be broken down and be without breaking down the individual atoms that make it up. The difference between an element and a compound. A compound is two or more elements mixed together. An element is by itself. Again, you're taught this in chemistry class, I hope. Anybody? Okay, it's there. And in a lot more detail. Now, Michael Faraday. If you know anything about electronics, the capacitor, the unit of capacitor is measured in farads, named after him. But anyway, he put together a device that was really crude, but he put together a generator, and it wound up taking mankind 50 years to develop a really good generator. But in every automobile you see out here, except for the electric cars, you'll find a generator. The source today is called an alternator. And every airplane and every boat, any boat that has a gasoline engine, I mean, any boat of any size, you'll find an electrical generator. The electricity used in this room was generated by generators. Again, thank Michael Faraday, who built a crude generator, but eventually mankind learned how to take his invention and make it better. Now, the scientific method. A man I did not mention about when I could have, because your authors have tended to leave him out in recent years, but Francis Bacon, I'm not going to write him down, but way back there, gave us the scientific method. Essentially, the scientific method consisted of you prove what you believe. You prove it by experimentation. And he advocated that you should have this.
Didn't you know his name for the test?
No, that's why I'm not writing his name down. I mean, your authors used to mention him. I used to emphasize him more, but Basically, but I am talking about the scientific method here, and that's going to become very important. I mean, your book puts the word scientific method in dark, bold print, and I'm spending some time talking about it, because I will be doing that especially when it comes to the next little paragraph. But essentially, Bacon said you believe that which you cannot disprove. You know, he said everything is true under certain circumstances. In other words, if 2 plus 2 is 4, and 2 times 2 is 4, is it reasonable that 3 plus 3 is the same as 3 times 3? It is not reasonable. Special case. He said anything is true under certain conditions, maybe under what's called special cases. But if you believe something to be true, you don't set out to prove it because you've already done it, I wouldn't believe it. You set out to try to disprove it, and if you can't disprove it, then you believe it. It's called being falsifiable. You believe what you can repeat. Now, one of the big discoveries in my time has been the discovery of planets around, at least 500 planets around the stars. We discovered them when we got better telescopes. These telescopes would notice that these stars would tend to wobble on a regular basis, first this way and then this, a little bit. Well, one astronomer reported them, and other astronomers didn't believe it, but then they started observing and noticed the same wobble. And the wobble was very regular and very predictable, and they had to conclude, well, it's because of planets that are so far away we can't see them, but their gravitational pull is interacting with these stars and pulling these stars, and then making these stars wobble in their orbits. So then they began to figure out the distance these planets were from their stars and how much mass these planets had, and how long it took them to orbit around the stars and what the temperature of these planets might be. But all this with planets they cannot see. But again, it's repeatable, therefore it's considered science. Again, at Lockheed, we'd measure, measure thermometers, and when we struck a ball at 212, we'd say, well, this thermometer says 212, the water's boiling. We'd say this is a good thermometer. Of course, we'd measure thermometers against other standards also. Because, again, it was repeatable, testable. It's a scientific method. All right. Now, the scientific method somehow led to more secularization, the belief that truth was based on science and not necessarily what the religious leaders said it was. More and more secularization came about. And this has to obviously take us up to Darwin. All right, Charles Darwin. Born the same day Abraham Lincoln was, February 12th, 1809. And 5 years ago, it was the 200th anniversary of Darwin, and we tried to remember it. All right, essentially, now, where do I start? Darwin believed that all life came from simpler life forms that evolved into higher and higher life forms in a theory that's known as popularly as evolution. He came up with this theory, or published his book in 1859. Now, folks, I want to tell you up front, I have very strong feelings about this, and I'm going to spend some time going into it. So, and usually when I talk about this subject, everybody who is asleep gets awake, and everybody seems to be paying rapt attention. So, and if you have any comments, I want to ask if this for once, just hold them until I get through, then I'll let you make your comments. All right, I'll start with the title of Darwin's book. The title of his book that your authors give is The Origin of Species. Let's see, all right, on the origin of, sometimes it's just simply called The Origin of Species, where he said that all species evolved from other species. And as for humans, humans evolved from monkey-like ancestors. He did not say that men came from monkeys. He just said that men and monkeys had the same ancestors. And he believed that with time we'd find the fossils that would show that the origin of the human and the monkey that came from the same skeleton that produced the human and the monkey. Now, what your book will not tell you, and what you have to do a lot of digging to find out, is this was not the real title. This is telling part of the truth. what was the title? On the Origin of Species by Natural Selection. No, that's not even all of it. Here's what it was. On the Origin of Species by Natural Selection for the Preservation and Enhancement of the Favored Races. Now, folks, I'll tell you, the word race was never used in human vocabulary up until Darwin. Darwin popularized the term. Now, about the word race, let me just say up front what I believe about race. There is only one race, and I'm about to prove that. The one race is the human race. But Darwin believed that there were many races. He listed 6 of them. And of the races, well, again, I can't look at what Darwin believed. He believed that the white race was the better of the races. And Negroes, Jews, and Slavic people, even though some Slavs were white, they were inferior. This is right in the book. I mean, you'll be reading about it in the next few days. Again, he popularized the idea that certain races, now, the natural selection part, now this is extremely dangerous. Natural selection taught us that the weaker needs to be eliminated so the better will survive and propel each species to a higher level. Therefore, we should not help the sick because they're weak anyway and they need to be eliminated. I mean, if you've read the book, this is down on pages 600 and 601. Every history book you read will tell about it. In addition, Adolf Hitler used this as justification for killing 15 million people, of whom 6 million were Jews, because he believed that the inferior races should be eliminated so that the higher races would be able to propel. And like I say, I told this class once that there was a black man who told me in this paper that he was in favor of Adolf Hitler. Did this black man know that Adolf Hitler sterilized every black person he could get a hold of to keep them from spreading his idea, not mine, their inferior genes to new generations? Then Adolf Hitler had to sit and watch during the 1936 Olympics while a black runner named Jesse Owen outran all the white runners. Any of you heard of the incident?
Yep.
Oh yes. And a black boxer, Joe Louis, slugged it out with Max Schmeling. You know about the story? And Joe Louis won. Now, Max Schmeling won the initial fight, which gave, that shows Aryan supremacy.
They actually became really good friends.
What's that?
Max Schmeling and Joe Louis actually became really good friends.
Yeah. They slugged it out again, and Joe Louis won a second fight. Then they slugged out the third time, and Joe Louis won a third fight. All this you'll find in your history books with a little bit of, some of you already heard the stories. Basically,